Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to celebrate Scarlett St. Clair and the release of Queen of Myth and Monsters. I am Kat Delacorte. I am going to be moderating the conversation between Scarlett and the wonderful Tasha Suri. And we will also have a Q&A box at the bottom. So if any of you have a question that you would like to ask, just pop it in the chat and we will try to get to everyone before the end of the evening. I am just going to take a moment to introduce each of our wonderful authors. Scarlett St. Clair is the USA Today best-selling author of the Hades and Persephone saga, the Hades saga, and When the Stars Come Out. Her most recent series, King of Battle and Blood, which is the first book in the Adrian and Isolde saga, has become a book talk phenomenon, reaching over 14 million views on the hashtag. Scarlett is a member of the Muskogee Nation and has a master's degree in library science and information studies and a bachelor in English writing. Tasha Suri is an award-winning author, a writing tutor, an occasional librarian, and a cat owner. Her debut novel, Empire of Sand, was named one of the 100 best fantasy books of all time by Time magazine. She has won the Best Newcomer Award from the British Fantasy Society, the Starburst Brave New Words Award, and most recently for the Jasmine Throne, the Best Novel in the World Fantasy Awards. Thank you both so much for being here. I am very excited for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kat.
So to start us off, could you just tell us each a little bit about your most recent novel and how it fits into the broader series?
I think you have to go first, Scarlett. You do.
Well, I feel so bad because I have moved on in my brain. Yeah, Queen of Myth and Monsters picks up where we left off in King of Battle and Blood. And I can't really, you just read the book because it's a spoiler if I tell you about most of it, but it's basically, I would say, like Isolde's journey toward empowerment, and it has a huge commentary, I think, on the patriarchy and sort of how do you dismantle that when that's been, the biggest part of your life. And if I say anything else about the book, it's just really hard to talk about because it is a huge spoiler. So I'm terrible at this. Absolutely terrible.
Scarlett, give us a little taste of the first book so anybody who hasn't read it can kind of get a little flavor of what's coming in book 2.
Yeah. That it's mostly an enemies to lovers, high fantasy. It's about a vampire king who has been conquering this world of Cordova for about 200 years in revenge, sort of retaliation, and he comes to Isolde's land, and her father surrenders. But part of that surrender is Isolde's hand in marriage. So Isolde had all these very grandiose ideas about how she was going to live her life. And it's a change in an instant. So she had to sort of, rediscover what her identity was going to look like as Queen of Rebecca, which is Adrian's main kingdom. And it kind of spirals out from there. But she basically learns, of course, that the small world that she knew is not the greater world. And it's very traumatizing, I think. And later when we get into Queen of Myth and Monsters, I think they are all very morally gray. And I think she's even shocked by some of the decisions that she has to make as someone who is going to conquer a world.
Sounds really exciting.
The end.
No, I'm impressed that you did it without spoilers, because that is so hard trying to describe like a sequel without. Yeah, I feel you.
I do. Well, my problem is I will do it with spoilers, and that is why I'm like, say nothing, and then you're safe. But thank you for asking about KBB, because I can clearly talk about that one far easier than QMF.
Tasha.
Oh yeah, sorry. So my most recent book is The Oleander Sword, which is the sequel to The Jasmine Throne, and I like to call that series the one about morally grey lesbians burning down an empire. And that kind of feels like consistently the plot of book 1 and book 2, so I don't feel like that's much of a spoiler. I've actually got the book next to me because I had a panel yesterday and I forgot to show it, so I'm going to do it now. Scarlett, do you have Queen of Myth and Monsters next to you? Can you bring it up?
Let's see. Oh, I do. Look at that. That's shocking.
It's a screenshot for the caption
I would show you the gorgeous Waterstones edition, but I don't have a copy yet. So, but it's beautiful. It's emerald. It matches yours very well.
Clearly we're smashing the patriarchy in emerald this year.
Yes. What? Look at my walls.
Thematic.
Yeah.
Of it. So going off of that, actually, because this is a perfect segue, both of your books are essentially about women dealing with power, magic, political power, and this idea of being perceived as monstrous for what they want, whether that's like something in their personal life, so a certain kind of romance or relationship, or it's something, that spans like conquering a kingdom. And I personally really love reading like unlikable, kind of anti-hero girls who get angry and, aren't always perceived as like, the good girl by people around them. And so I would love to hear what your inspiration was behind those characters and if there's something that you would like readers to take away from their journey.
I'm going to let Tasha lead with this one.
I think there's a lot of talk, often in not just in online circles, but all over the place, about the idea that people don't like difficult women or complicated women or darker women. And I think on some level that can be true, but I think actually a lot of readers really want women in their books who, like, can I swear? I don't know, who fuck shit up. They want women who are going to go out and like smash things apart and scream. They like female rage. They want to see that on the page. So I was definitely influenced by a lot of the religious texts that I read growing up, which are also mythic, which is a kind of weird double crossover, and the kind of the women in there who are very morally grey and very interesting, and I wanted to bring their stories in a fantasy setting to the forefront. But I also just wanted to write about the kind of women that I wanted to read, which is to say women who were angry and did something about it, and that something isn't always a good thing or a nice thing or the sweet thing that's expected of them, but it's nonetheless a really cathartic thing that I really wanted to see on the page. And I think Isolde is quite similar to that as well, but I'll let you speak about that.
Yeah, she is. I think I always say that, Isolde is who I aspire to be. She's very unapologetic. And it's so hard in our society as a female to, feel like you don't have to apologize. Even when I say something that's my actual truth and from a place of anger, I feel like I always have to apologize for it because I was too rough, right? Or I was too direct. All my life, all I've ever heard is, how my candidness is not a good thing. And it's just my personality. Like, I'm going to be sort of abrasive sometimes, and that's just who I am. So writing Isolde is very cathartic because of that. But I have found this sort of division among readers where people really relate to Isolde and really love her and aspire to be her, and people who really hate her and think she's a bitch. And so I took issue with that phrasing because I think it's interesting when even given a person who is in a world that fights against them, like BIPOC women, for example, they're bitches for defending themselves and for trying to survive. And so often we see this in our world and in fantasy worlds where, given our circumstances, we have these very harsh expectations placed upon us. And when we react normally and naturally, as a man might act, we're the bad ones for it. That pisses me off. So writing Isolde has been, it's almost an interesting case study in how internalized misogyny has made women just hate women. So yeah, I think a lot of it came from a place of anger. And I say a lot that QMM is just like, I was just so angry writing it because of everything that had been happening to women and among women at the time I was writing it.
I love that. Yeah, I think it really comes across. Like, it's very interesting what you're saying, how often reviewers will take issue with that. And it's very much like, okay, so you're telling us just not to be loud because that bothers you. Like, okay, yeah. I see you.
Yeah. I fought with someone in my comments about it. So. I was like,
you're brave.
This went over your head, I'm like, it went over your head. And you're part of the
No,
problem and you don't realize that you are, you know?
To be honest though, Scarlett, when people say that, I try not to look at reviews, but whenever I assume that whenever somebody says these women were too awful, they were too evil, that brings me a new person who wants to read the book because it's getting it to the right audience.
I agree. And so I wasn't looking at reviews. I'll say I wasn't looking at reviews.
No. I comments are different because they're directed at you. That's the rule.
I was like, that was, yeah. But yes, I agree. I think that those comments really do. They're speaking to a group of women who are honestly ready to wake up and rise. And I used to say this because I do obviously write fantasy romance. I used to say I didn't think I could change the world writing romance. But the women, my female readers, even my male readers, I'm like, we are changing the world. Like, you guys, like, these people, the way they're motivated after reading his old story, like, blows my mind. And you always hope for that. You always hope that you're inspiring people to stand up for themselves or like get out of that toxic relationship or recognize their power. And when I hear those stories, no matter what is out there, no matter what, bullshit people say about my books, I'm like, those are the people that matter. The people who are,
the thing is that like romance is so powerful, right? Like romance novels have been such a huge comfort to me at difficult moments in my life. And I remember at one point, complete aside, my mom had a stroke and then she read Laura Kinsale's book, Flowers in the Storm, which had a hero who had a stroke and had aphasia. And it made such a huge difference to her to see that on the page and to have that like happy ending, that romance, that comfort, but also to have herself represented. So yeah, romance is world changing, definitely.
I agree. I had to learn that.
Yeah, I think
librarianship helps me with that.
No, I think that there's such a kind of like a stigma against romance being seen as like serious literature, and I think it's honestly such BS. And both of your books have such a strong central romance, but there also is like fantasy world built around that, and it's like you can have both things. And I did want to ask about sort of what went into the world building, because I love how rich and diverse both of your worlds are and how they feel to me firmly rooted in different kinds of like mythology. And I would love to know were you drawing from like real kind of folklore or legends or pieces of history and specific cultures when creating both the Burning Kingdoms and King of Battle and Blood?
And like, who wants to go first?
I feel like we should do like a rock, paper, scissors to decide who goes first. Kat, you're gonna have to pick.
Okay, I'll pick. Tasha, go.
Oh, damn. Okay. So I think it's really obvious that the Burning Kingdoms has a really strong South Asian influence to it. So in my previous books, Empire of Sand and Realm of Ash, I've talked a lot about the fact I did a huge amount of research about medieval and early modern North India, and also parts of Central Asia, because I wanted to draw from a Mughal influence in my world building. When I came to the Burning Kingdoms, though, I decided that I wanted to have as much freedom as anybody writing Western fantasy in a kind of faux medieval setting, where you can draw from the Renaissance, the early modern period, you can draw from absolutely made up stuff in your head. And that is completely valid because in the end, you're telling a story. So I wanted to draw from I drew a little bit from Mughal history because I love it, but also just more broadly from the history of medieval India, both South and North, from broader South Asia, and also just from the myths I grew up with, and from I always bring up vibes, but it's true, the vibes and aesthetics that I saw in a lot of the TV shows that I grew up with, that my grandma used to watch. And I wanted to bring that aesthetic to the page, much like I think a lot of modern fantasy writers bring the aesthetic of something like Lord of the Rings to the page. I think that's a perfectly valid approach. So I wanted it to not feel rooted in one particular moment in history. I wanted it to feel very like fantastically South Asian without being, and this was the 13th century in Chennai, for example.
I love that you talk about vibes, because I totally think, and I don't know if it's like our society right now thing, but I'm like, it's a real thing. And I remember thinking about KBB and how I wanted it to feel, and I really wanted to be like very horror-esque and gothic and have that. You know how everyone's joking about how dark Game of Thrones is, like visually? That's kind of how I was like, yeah, like that's what I think about KBB. It's very.
You were like, I don't want anyone to be able to see my characters.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, I think I can't quite remember like where like world building started for me, but I do remember thinking I wanted my vampires to be, you know, part traditional but not connected to Dracula, because a lot of KBB is rooted in Romanian history, but that is partly because they have such this huge rich culture of monsters and a belief system around them, and I think it's so intriguing and amazing. So I found this encyclopedia called the Encyclopedia of Vampiric Mythology, which I had no idea existed, and I didn't even know there was such things as like vampirologists. And but the author talked about how vampires are a manifestation of a culture's fears. So every culture has their own version of a vampire, and it's not hardly any of them are anything we would imagine as what Western culture envisions as a vampire. So I thought that was very interesting. So I pulled from that lots of different creatures from that encyclopedia, and then the concept of, in this world, what do they fear? So what do the humans fear? So what sort of vampire would manifest from their fears? And then a couple of things I drew from King James's particular witch hunts in Scotland, because he had I guess I liked how it read, like how the history of it read, because he was very much someone who was seeking power, and so he thought a way to gain power is by, you know, making people afraid, so they'll turn to me, so I can be the hero. And he did have a woman in particular who claimed that she could look at someone and say like, they're a witch, and I'm like, didn't anyone think like, isn't that witchcraft? Like, aren't you a witch? But anyway, she killed a lot of people, and that was a thread. And then I also read this book about, I've read a lot of witchcraft books, but in particular one called Witch by Lisa Lester. And I loved her concept of witchcraft, how every woman is witchy, and the things that society's oppressed about us, like our intuition, is saying, oh, we're just too sensitive. That's a form of magic, and it's a threat to society, and especially males. And so instead of, you know, cultivating and encouraging that, it's oppressed. So we're taught not to pay attention to it. So it was like all this stuff that I just like read and internalized, and it came out in this world. It was very chaotic, but
I love that. That is so cool. And I strongly relate to the vibes thing, because like, what is a plot, you know, like vibes only. So I'm curious, drawing kind of on that, and also what you've been saying about, you know, like strong women, when you are drafting, do you find that you're drawn to the world and the vibes first, or do you have a character that comes to you and is like, write me, help me, make me alive?
Definitely characters first. I always hear them talk, and then the world is around it. So which is kind of annoying sometimes, because I just write all these dialogue scenes, and I'm like, what's the point of you? You just keep talking and interrupting like another book I'm working on. But they eventually will tell you their story, I think, and that's kind of how I decide what to start researching.
For me, I think they kind of come together. I never kind of get the world without the characters. I always have this, it's almost like a Pinterest board. I always have the characters in my head and what one of them at least looks like, and how they move, and how they kind of interact with the world before I necessarily know the world on a larger scale. I do write epic fantasy, so you would think that I would be really interested in the world building, and building the world to be the most important thing to me, but it's just really not, because I think that in the end, the world has to be interesting. Like your readers have to enjoy your world and want to be immersed in it, but your characters are your window into the world, and your characters are the most important thing by far. So the world has to serve that first.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's definitely how I draft as well, which has been difficult because I have no plot for my second book, but don't tell me.
We'll keep it secret, don't worry.
Yeah, just but speaking of drafting, Scarlett, I've heard you say that Queen of Myth and Monsters turned out differently as you were drafting it than what you expected it to be. I'm curious if you can tell us how it changed. And I guess following on that, for both of you, what is the drafting process? Do you know when you're doing a trilogy or a series how it's going to end? Or do you just kind of make it up as you go?
I thought I knew how this book was going to end, and then did not end the way that I thought it was going to end. I think what happened is, so I write on a different schedule than I think most traditional authors write on, because I sort of I still have like a self-publishing schedule. So instead of the books that are published for me were written probably 4 months ago. So 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 I have a very compact time. But what happened is I had to write the first chapter of this book very early on. And I went back to it and I felt like the tone was wrong. And once I had to shift the tone, I was like, this is not going at all how I thought it was going to go. And something happens within the first 5 chapters. And I was like, I didn't like it at all at first. And I was like, I don't want to do this, but I knew we had to go. Now I love it. But at first I was like, no, I hate this. So I was fighting it. And then everything from there, once I figured out what was happening within, because there's kind of a battle in those first 3 chapters, and that's what I didn't expect. And then that one thing led to everything else changing. And I tried to fight it, which is why I ended up writing 100K in a month to just get the book done, because I was like, it did not go how I planned. And for as far as like, I don't plan out a series, but I do typically think I know where it's going to end. Like for Chaos, I think I know where we're ending. But my editor's really funny because there's supposed to be 3 books in KBB series, and I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, there's only going to be 3 books, Scarlett. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. After writing QMM, I was like, listen, do we know anything? Like, do we really know anything? So I'm chaotic is what I've learned.
Love that. Tasha, do you know how your trilogy is ending? I'm assuming you do.
I do. I mean, I've written the draft of book 3. Yeah, the draft is done. Don't worry. It needs a lot of work, but my process is very I write have you seen that Bake Off meme where the guy is like started making the thing? Had a breakdown, bon appetit. That's my process. I bet my agent is a very sweet woman, but I bet that she could probably time the breakdown if she got a calendar out. Like I have a complete breakdown at the end of every draft, which is fine and normal, a very healthy and sane process. But the thing is, I do plan my series, but at the same time things do change as you write, like, and sometimes characters do what they want to do and you have to give them space to do that. What I usually have is a very clear image that has to happen at the end of one of the books. So with the Oleander Sword, there's a really pivotal scene that I can't talk about because it's a spoiler, that happens at the end of the book that people yell at me for, and I knew that one scene had to happen. Everything had to lead to that scene, because if that scene didn't happen, the book didn't, there was no point to the book. That was what I was writing it for. And with the last book in the series, I also have a scene in my head that has to occur. So everything has to make that scene feel important and real and earned. And then I've done my job. And that's how I work, really. I like to leave a bit of space for fun and breakdowns.
Yeah,
I love that. And mental breakdowns.
Yes.
Most important part of the drafting process.
Yeah.
Everyone can relate. Yeah, it's what makes you an author. How many breakdowns do you have?
I'm so glad I'm not alone, because I thought there were so many times during QMM where I was like, I'm not going to make it, and I just would cry, and then I'd be like, well, you got to do it because you have a deadline.
I think that like learning resilience to push through those moments that's something that you don't necessarily anticipate having to figure out when you go into like professional writing. I think it's been a shock to me personally. Like, oh, if you have a breakdown, you can't just stop and be like, I'm gonna lie in bed. It's like, no, you have to keep going. So yeah, it's hard. I'm in the learning process. So, and it's very good to you have made it, both of you. You've made it to the other side.
Oh, I'm going to speak for Scarlett here and say that, and we don't know what we're doing. It's just screaming the whole way. Like we can say, oh, and then, we got up and we did this. No, doubt.
So much doubt. And I keep thinking it's going to change, like with and it never does. And I'm like, is this just my process? Do I just have to anticipate this horrifying emotional breakdown every time I write a book? And I think the answer is yes. I really think like it's just what it is. So I'm in for it in the next 5 months. But knowing I'm not alone is very helpful.
Oh no, I'll be in London crying, so we can share that moment.
I think especially for aspiring writers, it's really useful to hear that, because I think that there's not always a lot of transparency about kind of what happens once you get published and then you're kind of on this journey. And it's like, it remains incredibly challenging and incredibly emotionally volatile. And I think that that's good to know, because then you don't go into it thinking that you're the anomaly and that you're, you know, like losing your mind. So yeah. Going on kind of a positive note, since drafting can be hell, is there a favorite scene and a scene that you're absolutely so proud of and that you absolutely had the best time drafting and it was so easy and it made everything worthwhile and there were no breakdowns?
Yes, for me, but I'm gonna let Scarlett,
okay,
because I can see like the panic.
No, I can't remember my book. I don't remember what I don't
dream.
know. I know, I don't know. You'll have to go because hold on. I gotta look.
You can probably steal my answer because I know you're going to have many more of these than I do. It's a spoiler. Oh, I don't care.
Don't care. It's fine.
Yeah, the sex scene.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
valid.
I've said it now. There we go. I mean, it's not a surprise.
Okay.
I only managed to get one into the book because it's mostly a battle all the way through, and they're not meant to be together. It's meant to be like, oh, different sides, enemies. And I was like, can't even get them in the same room. I've created a rod for my own back.
They
but
need
once
to be in the same room.
it does help, you know, you can't Skype. I did put a lot of love letters in because it's a sapphic love story, and I was like, there is nothing more quintessentially lesbian than letters. So we're gonna have some letters. But yeah, I got them in a room and I was like, this is great. This is the easiest thing I've had to write for the entire book. And it was very sweet. My editor only put one note on it, which is, I think their outfit changed partway through. And I was like, yeah, true. I got confused as to what they were wearing.
I love that. That's such a good problem to have. Like, that should be what we all aspire to, give editorial feedback. It's like, that's it.
I know. I love when my editor says they love something because most of it's just, you know, fix this. You know, it's funny that you say that because I have a lot of sex scenes that
I know.
So I'm like, I can't remember which one's my favorite. I do like, I can just spoil it. It's fine. You know, it's been out since December. One of my favorite scenes to write was the turning scene where she does become a vampire. And it's because I felt like there's such an intensity behind like that whole sex scene and that whole, like, you know, like when she wakes up and her throat is burning, he's like, come on, you gotta, you know, drink this blood. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. But I like all my sex scenes. I think there's such an empowerment with sex scenes. And the challenge for me is figuring out how to, you know, not make them feel the same because there's so many. And even the harder ones are the ones when I have to write from a male point of view. I hate that, but they're still fun. So that was I did steal your answer, kind of.
Still valid. Okay. Yeah.
The reason it's so hard because I have already written like this fairy tale retelling, and that like my brain is so full of that.
Oh, what's
and
the fairy tale retelling?
It's a whole thing. Everyone's trying to guess, and I'm like, can we just not try to guess?
It's a
secret. All
Kat, should we guess?
It's not a secret. It's out.
Should we
it's
guess?
out.
Are there hints?
But here's the thing about it. It's a retelling of a lot of fairy tales from the Grimm brothers, Hans Christian Andersen, and some fairy tale retellings. And then people started to call it, just from the blurb, of Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I'm like, let's not say that because it's not completely correct. Like, in fact, I didn't even take from Beauty and the Beast. There were just elements that, because fairy tales are so similar. And so I can see the reviews now. Everyone said this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's not Beauty and the Beast at all. And I'm like, I never said that. I never said that. So my brain is like full of this like fairy tale, like this. It's my favorite thing I've ever written. Absolutely my favorite thing I've ever written. It's a novella. I'm so excited about it. It's so dumb, but it's also like it's hilarious and sexy and like horrific. It's everything that I have ever wanted in a book. So I'm excited about it. It's coming out in March.
Okay.
And what's the
Okay, I'm
title?
very excited. This is what you
Mountains? Yeah, Mountains Made of Glass, and which is so funny. The title is a call to Grimm retellings because they always have the glass mountains, and the glass mountains are like sort of one of the the main figures in the book. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch people try to guess, and part of me is like, please don't guess, you're gonna be wrong.
You will only
anxiety.
It's definitely Pinocchio, isn't it? You can tell us.
Yeah, 100%. The nose the nose is used for all sorts of things.
Oh no, I should have known it would go there. Why? I did this to myself.
You did. It was your fault.
Absolutely, I take full responsibility.
And then later, I will see this in a group or something. Scarlett said this is Pinocchio. That's not what I said at all.
I love causing chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, the internet will twist anything out of like context. So by the end of it, it'll be like, yeah, it's the nose.
Hear us? Don't do this.
This is your warning. Okay, so speaking of like retellings, like things that are inspiring you, was there a book or a like moment in your like childhood or whenever the point was in your life where you were like, I want to write? Was there something pivotal that you read or a character or an author or I don't know, a mentor, just anything that sort of set you on this path? Tasha.
Oh, there's been a few. I think a really huge one for me was probably The Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier. Which is literally a swan, like a Seven Brothers Swans, whatever that original one is called, the Wild Swans retelling, and it's set in a Celtic setting, and I just loved it. It was really romantic and it was really beautiful, and I read that entire series. But the one that really got me into writing was Cushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. Which is it's a big old chunker of a book, and
huge,
it's about
all of them.
all of every single one. If she wrote a short one, I'd be disappointed though. Like I know what I'm getting into.
I know.
Books. And it's about a God-touched masochistic courtesan and the political machination she gets involved with to save her land. And her love interests are respectively a extremely evil, raven-haired and blue-eyed sadist who keeps trying to destroy various countries, and a priest who is vowed to be chaste. So it's great.
I love it.
It's so good. And I read that when I was 12. We don't need to talk about it.
Great.
Yeah, bless her, God bless her. Jacqueline Carey, I wrote an email to her when I was about 14 telling her how important her books were to me, and she answered very politely, but I can now imagine how horrific that must have been from her end. Like, what are your parents letting you read, child? But yeah, those books had a huge influence on me.
That's so funny because I at my signing with QMM at my tour, I had a reader come up to me and she said, I bet I am your youngest reader. And I said, try me. And she said, I'm 15. And I said, I had a 14-year-old before you. And, and I'm just like, but I do have a degree in library science. So I do believe that I 100% believe that teens know what they're reading, and they know when they're reading something over their head, and I believe they will skip it, or they'll just, they'll pass over it, or, I've worked with teens for a really long time, and I really trust their brains. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. So I love that you were the 14-year-old reading.
My parents didn't check what I read, and I think that's true for a lot of teens, right? That like they
or
just
even
pick things up.
And I asked my dad about it one time. I was like, were you ever concerned about the books I was reading? He's like, no, because I trusted that if you picked up something that wasn't for you, you'd put it down. And what I did is I didn't put it down, but I did skip over what I didn't understand. And I vividly remember that. And I think I remember it because all the things I did in school, like all the articles I read about all these adults having opinions on what kids should read, and and sometimes what that does is discourage reading, and I'm 100% against that. So I would rather you read a book that you don't really understand than stop reading forever. But onto your question, I read The Lord of the Rings when I was 13, and I was a great reader prior to that, but all I read was mysteries. And when I read The Lord of the Rings, it made me realize that I could write fantasy and I could create worlds. And I never realized I could do that before. And from that point forward, I wanted to be a writer, but not just any writer. I was like, I'm going to be a world famous writer. And I told everyone, and it's so embarrassing now, but it's fine. Because I'm pretty well known as an author, which is very cool. But it was just the coolest thing to be able to be shown by another author that I could create a world where I could escape to and I could control. And I think I really needed that as in my childhood. And I never looked back, and every decision I made from that point forward was centered around being an author, even becoming a librarian.
I love that. And also, like, you said it and now it came true. So like, you are the world, like, you are a world, like, don't be embarrassed. It happened. It's all
this
good.
is literally like a Zoom event in another country. So you are
it's a weird thing to think about, but I am very grateful. And I've done a lot of really cool things. Like, I got to go to Paris. I got to go to France twice last year because my books have been really popular in France, and I'm so grateful for that. The funny thing is, though, my friends, I was in this Walmart ad that Walmart like pushed hardcore, and that's what my friends thought was the coolest thing they'd ever seen in their life. And I was like, really, guys? But it was super cool. It cracked me up that was there. Like, you've made it, Scarlett. I saw your Walmart ad.
I do think that Walmart is like an American touchstone for like mass.
Oh yeah.
It's like, if you're in Walmart, you're good. Like, my grandma
It was
saw
really
it.
cool. I know. Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is that I'm in Walmart, and Walmart really supported the QMM release, and I'm so grateful for that. But I had been told by publishers before that was the only other thing they could do for me, because I was a successful self-published author, was get me into Walmart and Target, but that's probably not viable because of what you write, which they meant sex. And but I'm in Walmart and Target, and so it's kind of fun to be like, in your face.
That's very cool. Very much goals. I'm curious, you said that like Isolde is who you kind of want to be. And I'm wondering, do either of you put like autobiographical bits into your characters, or people that you know, or people that you hate and then they get killed, or anything like from the real world?
I want Tasha to answer this.
I think that I try to avoid putting real people that I've met straight into books, but I do try and bring a real experience to the page, because I think when you're writing fantasy, it can often feel quite disconnected from the real world. And what you want fantasy to ideally do is alchemize a real experience in a new setting, so it feels familiar but also different enough that it's kind of exciting or cathartic again. So I draw on real anger and real, I guess, just not just real anger, but like real ambition, real hunger, real emotion. And definitely the villains in my work, I draw on things that I've seen in people that have upset me or hurt me or whatever it might be, but in a very, very kind of broad way. It's taking that emotion and that experience and making it feel real, but making it so different that it's fun for me to work with. The reason I don't write real world stuff very often is I don't really find that as interesting to explore, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I could write in the real world because I'm constantly trying to escape it. Like, it defeats the purpose of it. I sound like I really like hate this existence, but I don't. I think that I live in the real world every day.
We can hate it. It's fine.
Yeah, I've never really thought twice about maybe entities like a government that wants to control women's rights. Like, I think in terms of that, like, QMM was definitely like a lot of my anger toward that I was channeled there. But definitely on an emotional level, I put a lot of myself into my characters and a lot of the trauma that I've experienced. Like the Hades and Persephone saga is all about my trauma. But I say often, like without like writing Persephone and all of that, I would not have gotten to the point where I could write Isolde, because Isolde is, part of who I became by writing myself into, Persephone's growth. And she has a lot of similar experiences that I had as a child, a narcissistic mother who caused me a lot of anxiety, the deaths and the grieving that occur in Ruin and Malice. I lost my dad around at the same time, and so, yeah, you kind of can't help but, I think, channel those emotions. And I think that's what makes people relate, of course, like you said, to those characters, especially when you're putting them in a world that is so fantastical in a lot of ways, and the impossible happens there, So.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when people ask, like, do you put yourself in your characters? And it's like inevitably, like, kind of yes, in all of, like, it's you're
in all of them.
Yeah, you're there no matter what. And it's just
I think I'm hilarious, and Hermes is hilarious. So I'm just,
Love it. Yeah. Okay, so if you could have one of your characters to dinner, who would it be? Or it can be yours, or it can be like, I guess, from a different fictional world, if you're feeling really adventurous.
I guess.
Scarlett, you've got to take that one. I'm really curious who you would take.
It depends on the day. It would probably be either Akate, she's goddess of witchcraft, and I love her. And a lot of my readers say that I remind them of her, which I think is super adorable. Or Hermes. It just depends. Like, do I want to like have a chill conversation, or do I want a party? Because Hermes, it's just like really, really fun, and sometimes you need that. He's also a really good friend. They're both really good friends, and they call you out when you're being stupid. Just everyone needs a friend like that. Who would you take?
All my characters would poison me in some way, so I'm trying to think of one that wouldn't. I think maybe for people who've read the book, Rao, because he's just a nice guy. He's like the only quintessentially nice person in any of my books. So he would just
you need a nice person. You need to write a nice person.
I think he would sit there and have a nice conversation with me and eat the food, and he wouldn't cause any trouble. Yeah, maybe just him. Maybe only him. None of the others would be.
You wouldn't have to worry for your life.
We all die. I love that. Yeah, that's a good answer. Fair. And the person who won't murder you, I accept.
Yeah. I think, unless I want a really spicy dinner where I'm like, when will the arsenic turn up? I think he's the good one. I'll go with him.
I love that. Is there an experience with readers that either one of you've had that like stands out as like one of the most memorable things? Not to like put any reader above any other reader, but like something that made you feel like, okay, I finally achieved what I wanted to achieve. Like I became someone's favorite book, or like this person, like they, really resonated with my work. Anyone? Tasha? I don't know. I had like below me on the screen, so I keep being like,
oh no,
Tasha.
It's literally just I did like an AMA on Instagram, and somebody said I wrote smutty fanfic about your work, and I was like, I've done it. I've achieved everything I've ever wanted to do.
Here.
That's it. That's it.
I was like, I don't need to do anything else with my life. I can't read it, which is really infuriating, but I know it exists somewhere on the internet, and I'm really happy about that. That's it. That's all I wanted to accomplish. You can read it. Are you going on AO3 right now?
I might be. I don't know how many AO3 tabs I have open on my phone. Like, oh my god, it's
I don't think that's in my cards since I write so much smut.
I have
so.
All you have to do is hint at a couple and don't put them together, and somebody will get in there.
People really want Akate and Hermes like a book, and I'm like, I can't do a book, but I do have something planned for people who really love those two characters. I love when your secondary characters become so endearing that people want like everything. I have a lot. I don't know how to narrow this down, but yeah, like when people do tell me like your books got me back into reading, or I had a man who was he said, I haven't picked up a book in 40 years, and I picked up A Touch of Darkness. My wife suggested it, and I can't put your books down. And I had a mom message me and say, asked about my audiobooks. She said, I know this might sound weird, but I have a 17-year-old autistic son who loves your books, and he doesn't read anything else. And I was like, no, that's super cool. And I had a man at my recent signing, and I thought he was there with a significant other just because everyone else was there with a significant other, and he had a stack of books beside him. But he was there for himself, and he came up to me and he said, your books helped me through my PTSD this last year. And I was just like, isn't it amazing where your words just like have that kind of impact on someone's life? Just so many amazing stories like that. People who have decided to finally like divorce their toxic husband because they read A Touch Darkness. I'm like, how did those words inspire people to just get things done? It blows my mind every single day. Very grateful.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. That's the goal. That's like why you write,
Yeah.
Because it's also like if someone did that for you when you were younger or like when you were aspiring, and then to get to be that for someone else is like really incredible.
That was my goal. As like when I said I wanted to be a famous author, I always said I wanted to change lives. And the funny thing is that as at large, I think our society is so against romance and sex and books. My books have a ton of sex, and they still do that for people. They still change their lives in monumental ways. And that's the power of a novel.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Maybe that's a good note to end on. I think we're out of time. Where's my clock? Let me see if there's anything. Questions? No. Okay, we're good. Do you have anything that you want to ask each other before we close? Because someone asked me this before on a panel, and I really enjoyed getting to ask the other person a question. So if you want to ask each other anything before we wrap up, or not, no pressure. Also,
my brain is so dead. I'm like,
what are words?
What I know. It's always just the question element that I'm always like, what are questions? Because I want to have like the best question.
How about just plug your next work? And I'm pretty sure yours, well, okay, I'm not going to say it. Each of you tell us what you're working on next. Because yeah.
I have said a lot. Tasha, you go first, because I have said all my things.
Is your next release Mountains of Glass?
Is it Mountains of Glass? Yeah. So you said you've got a novella, and then you've got the next book in the series as well.
A novella, and then I'm going to work on Gods, A Game of Gods, which is like Hades' point of view of malice, and then A Touch of Chaos, which is what everyone is asking me about. And so that's due September. That's the date is September 26th when that releases. We're not announcing a date for Gods because I'm trying to release it before Chaos, but I just have to make sure I can write it.
Okay. You can do it.
I can do it.
Yeah, you can have just schedule in the breakdown, and then then get the book done. Yeah, easy.
We have come full circle.
Yes, my next book is the third book in the Burning Kingdoms, and I've been told on pain or death I'm not meant to release the name yet. So I won't. But I have seen a draft of the cover, and it is immense. It is. So
isn't that the best feeling?
It's so exciting, and I've been like consistently so pleased with my covers. It's been so nice to have
they're beautiful
still here. Yeah, to have like a woman in a sari on a cover of a fantasy book has been so good. And so I'm really happy about that, and everything else I can't talk about, which is a pain. So at some point I'll mention things.
It's so hard to be like in that space where you can't talk about things. I have that less than you. I'm betting because I just do what I want most of the time. I don't get in trouble for it. But I also don't have an agent, so I just have a publisher, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this thing. The only things I kind of keep like the cover for Kingdom, which I do have, the third KBB book. I will let like probably Barnes and Noble release that, but otherwise I'm like, here's the title. I have no chill. How do you wait? Like, how are you patient with that? Like, do you send it to all your friends? Like, what? You share it with someone.
Obviously, all my friends know all my business. I don't keep any secrets from them. But I have to be sort of, I don't like being yelled at I really hate being yelled at, so I keep quiet otherwise. But I also kind of like the whole like, I've got something exciting to say, but I'm not going to say it thing, because it drives people mad. I hate when other people do it. So now I get to do it. I'm like, I'm going to continue this vicious cycle. Yes. And, you know, I may have no secrets. I may just be saying that. Nobody will know. It could just be a long con.
It's very good. It's a
That's
very good
mean. This is true evil here.
I model my characters on me. They're just me.
Yeah.
It's really you who would poison the people you go to dinner with.
Oh no, never. I'm not good enough at cooking. It's not a problem.
You can still poison takeaway though. Like,
yeah, that sounds like work. Yeah, no.
She's like, really, I'm too lazy for it.
Yes. The world is saved from my evil by my laziness.
I love that.
Oh my gosh.
All right. I think probably, are we good? We should wrap up, right? Yeah. I feel like we could go on forever. Like, I kind of want to.
If anyone in the audience has a question, you can throw it to us now. But I mean,
if anyone wants to ask anything, ask now. Otherwise,
ask now or forever hold your peace.
You could ask Scarlett what fairy tale her next book is based
and then
on.
she
And then she has to answer.
The hard part about this is because it's like, it's not any one fairy tale. Like the way I write retellings, the same way I do my Greek stuff, is I just like, I've read a lot and then I internalize all of that, and then everything just sort of weaves together into this new world. So it's hard to be like, I can tell you like how it started, which is with this. It started with this fairy tale about the devil and the 3 golden hairs. And it went from there, and that was kind of the crux of the story. But it's funny because that story, there's a part in it where this kid has to go to the devil to get 3 hairs off his head, right? And he goes through a town, and in the town the well is dry, and at the bottom of the well is a frog under a stone, and if you kill the frog, the well will fill up again. And people think by reading the blurb that I am playing off the Frog Prince, and I'm like, it's not related at all. So I did say at one point, you just have to read it, and I think it is something you just have to read to kind of, then you have to read the author's note to really understand what I did. But I do love that I'm at the point in my career where I can just like release some random ass story that is so, you know, weird, and people will just buy it without like any, like barely any context. Top tier there.
Goals,
like, this is really great. Just it doesn't have to have any like foundation in anything. It's just this bunch of random fairy tales that no one's ever heard of.
No, that's so
hopefully
cool.
people like it.
It's amazing. Yeah, and also doing the lesser known ones, I think, is really question.
Well, there's a bunch of Q&A section. Yeah.
Did you mention that they were getting extra content?
So I'm working on this announcement. It's not going to be a story per se, like an actual full-length novel, because remember that I write romances, and Hermes is pansexual and content to just be like whoever he is. Like, he does not want a relationship. But I have this idea to write, like, you know, like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. I have this idea to like make Kat and Hermes go on like these mystery quests. But I'm going to let my readers tell me what kind of quests. So it's going to be sort of like they get to choose, and then I write it. And I want to do it on the Patreon because I want to set up donations to this organization that's really close to my heart, which is called Hope. And it's for missing and Indigenous women, and I would like to donate all those proceeds to Hope. So we're working on it. It's slow go, but so everyone's going to get their Hermes and Kat fix, and they get to help me. So yeah,
that's so cool.
I'm excited.
That sounds really fun.
Thank you. I am excited about it.
All right. Anyone else? Show up now. Otherwise.
This question is, Tasha, do you have a retelling you always wanted to write?
Oh my God, the question box.
That's a great question.
No, because I've been looking at the cat. Sorry.
No. I wrote a retelling of Wuthering Heights, which was really fun.
Yes,
so
I saw that.
yeah,
I didn't know you did that. I'm so ready to read that.
It was so much fun to do. So I've kind of done the big retelling that I really wanted to, but I would love to kind of do a fairy tale at some point. Not Beauty and the Beast, because that was never my favorite, but a fairy tale. I don't know which one. I love Sleeping Beauty, but that's been done, I think, quite recently by a few people. So,
but not by you.
But not by me. That's true. That's true. But the Sapphics have cornered the market on Sleeping Beauty. There's been at least 2 retellings, and they were really good. So I don't know that I want to be like, and here's mine as well. But
you could do one where Snow White falls in love with the witch, because they're not, mother and daughter thing.
I mean, it's got a bit of a stepmother vibe though, which is like a new dynamic to bring to the page.
Take it, change the whole thing. Retellings are so fun.
You can do whatever you want. Yeah.
There's also a question from Megan asking, what are your daily writing routines?
I described the Bake Off meme. It's true every day.
I have a daily writing routine. This is terrible. I made a TikTok this morning and I was like, does it take 21 years to establish a new life? Because I don't know. Trying to be a full-time author is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I had more structure when I worked a full-time job and put my writing schedule around it.
Yeah, it's built in, like you then have the hour that you can write, and when you're a full-time writer, it's like, oh no, all this time must be
do this after 5. Yeah. And you think you will be productive, and you aren't.
I get productive at like 11 p.m. after spending the whole day panicking about not being productive. That's pretty much what happens.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
I feel that. We're not alone.
Yep, as always, we're killing it. All right, I think, yes, okay. I've checked the questions. I've checked the chat. We are good. Thank you both so much. This has been so fun. I really do feel like we could just talk for hours, but probably it shouldn't be like professionally recorded and put up on YouTube. So, no, maintain our reputations.
What's left of them at this point?
It'll just be a bunch of conversations about our nails.
Yeah, that's true.
No, you two will talk about your nails and I'll go, I don't do my nails, but I will listen quite happily.
But you support us.
Yes, I support you.
Endeavors. Thank you both so much. And thank you to Waterstones for hosting us as well. Sorry for the chaos at the end, but I think it's good for people to see like the real life, like this is how it is. Like it's chaos. So
we are chaos. Don't apologize for it.
Yeah, you're right.
Kat, before we end, would you just for me mention the name of your most recent your debut novel that just came out? Would you just would you name it, please?
Thank you. Yes, I wrote a novel called With Fire in Their Blood, which is like an Italian set like gothic contemporary fantasy novel about 2 mafia clans in this little town in the Italian mountains, which is based on the town that I grew up in, and they hunt witches, and there's lots of like bisexual chaos kissing.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing.
I would have loved to listen to you talk about witches, actually. That would have been really fascinating. But next time, maybe.
Next time.
We will do that next time.
Yeah, in person. That'll be really fun.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh,
Great.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, this has been so much fun.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day/evening. To everyone who watches this in the future.
Whatever time it is where you are.
Whatever time. Yeah.
We hope it's good.
Hope it's great. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.